So thank you for joining us. Where should we start from? Because since I came back and looking at this elections that will hold February 16, that's the presidential election, I've been asking my guests, give me a reading of what you've been seeing happening. So give me a reading, your own perspectives of what's been happening so far.
Well, I think, from my perspective, I have to look at it from the financial industry and the economic impact. And you sort of weigh up the two main candidates, the incumbent Buhari against the opposition Atiku. And if you were to drill it down to the economic policies, then you'd have to say, okay, which one is really impactful? But when you actually look at the two economic policies, they're not that much different. I think that what you will find is the capacity of the individual to execute and implement.
Capacity of the individual to deliver.
To deliver. And of course, on the PDP side, there's a lot more talk about restructuring Nigeria.
Business-friendly policies
making it more
and all
business-friendly, getting Nigeria back to work again. It's unfortunate, but during the last 3.5 years, we've actually seen a rise in unemployment. Numbers were around 3.5–4 million back in 2015. Now we're north of 21 million unemployed people. We've also seen a rise in number of children out of school. We used to be around 11 million children. Now we're about 13 million. But on the flip side, they've also introduced some, social intervention programs, trader money, and all those kind of creative ways of getting money to the people at the bottom of the society. Although just the timing of delivering that money, particularly just on the eve of an election, would suggest somewhat of a contrived arrangement. But anyway, for people to get money, it's good, at least. So when you look at the two platforms, the issue I think that the electorate will have to decide is who has the capacity to deliver on their promise. We've seen the promise of the last 3.5 years, which was focused on economy, corruption, and security, particularly focusing on clearing the problem in the Boko Haram northeast area. The jury's out in terms of their capacity to have been able to deliver on those three promises. So it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag indeed. Because
if you take a look at it, the issues are still on the table, whether you like it or not. You reel out some numbers. Poverty is still inherent. Nigeria is now the headquarters of poverty, yes. Unemployment rates high. Over 20 million people are unemployed. Our GDP growth about +1% right now.
It's actually targeting 2% this year.
Yeah, but that's not what we should be joyful, or that's not even what we should celebrate, because there was a time the country was growing at 6 to 7%. And even at that time, people like us were still saying that we are not growing adequately. It was a jobless growth, let alone now that we are down approaching 2%. So there's nothing to shine our teeth.
At 2% growth, we're getting poorer every year because the population is growing faster. 3.5%.
Yes, percent. So our economic growth is not equal to our population growth.
Yes,
so poverty will be inherent. So with all this right now, this president came in on the premise of, I'm going to tackle corruption, I'm going to revive the economy, and insecurity, I'm going to, solve it. But it seems now that all those things that he said prior to 2015 is still there.
Yes, I think insecurity has probably been sort of spread around the country, because we haven't quite completely solved Boko Haram. I think even they seem to be taking more territory with this Islamic State of West Africa, lately coming in and, sort of routing our military from their positions in and around Lake Chad. And then obviously you've seen the issues of herdsmen crisis and how that has precipitated over 3,000 deaths, and many millions of people dislodged from their homes. So that's a big issue. The economy, like you mentioned, hasn't recovered. The economy went into shock in 2016. The combined effect of the slowdown of the oil market, oil prices went down to like the $30 area per barrel, and the immediate enforcement of TSA back in 2015 just kind of sent the economy into shock, and we haven't quite grown out of that. So yes, well, corruption, again, the jury's out. Some people will claim that yes, the president is making an effort in enforcing corruption, and that is corruption fighting back. But when you actually look at the way the fight has gone, it will seem to suggest that it has been predominantly those who are not in APC that have been tackled as far as corruption issues, at least large-scale ones that we're aware of, are concerned. But it could also suggest that, today, most people in the civil service would take their jobs more seriously and will not, plan to do something that is untoward. Now, having put that aside, the bigger issues for the economy have yet to be tackled. Nigeria is like someone who has a major ailment, that requires a skilled surgeon to come in and fix. And what do? They carry a bandage, a plaster, and put on top of the wound. Meanwhile, there's serious problems going on the ground, going inside. Take our economy, the way it's designed. The president, from his perspective, likes to subsidize fuel, even though in his time he has increased the price of fuel from 87 naira per litre to 145 naira per litre. But today, we're still subsidizing.
That's what, and prior to 2015, it was also a campaign issue.
Yes, it was a campaign issue. He did promise to bring it down to about 40, but unfortunately it's gone the reverse. But notwithstanding that it's gone the reverse. And
subsidy is still being paid, however they want to call it, under recovery cost or whatever.
Absolutely. And it's that. I think we estimated about 1.6 trillion would have been paid in 2018 alone. And I think about how much we need to spend in human capital development, education, and healthcare.
It's not up to that.
And it's, in fact, not up to, I wouldn't say even 30% of that, that amount together. Then you realize, the key areas of development we should be focusing on. Instead, we're using it to subsidize fuel. And when you're subsidizing fuel, you're really subsidizing the elite in Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt to a large extent, because many parts of the country will pay whatever it is available, Remember, if you go around, yes, you can get, of course, supply is more stable now, but only NNPC is supplying. The marketers are really just looking at them. And so that subsidy element is money that we can use. If you look at the dual exchange rate, we have an official exchange rate at 305. We have the power market at the I&E window at 360. That differential is 54 naira. I mean, some newspapers were talking about it earlier this week.
And the CBN refuted it.
Yes, I know. But if you think about a state government that is supposed to get an allocation of $10 million, for example, this month, $10 million at 305 is 3.05 billion naira. $10 million at 360 is 3.6 billion. That's an additional 550 million naira that they could use to sort out, people that they have back salaries to pay, sort out pensions, invest in education, do another hospital or something. So if you really think about it, the aspect of this FAC allocation and JAC allocation you do, which is coming from the federation account, of which easily 70% of that is oil proceeds coming in, the state government could benefit from that. Why are they not thinking about it from that context? These are ways that you can bring in the liquidity to help solve many of the urgent problems in the system. And that's just looking at two aspects. I'm looking at just the exchange rate perspective as well as the issues in oil and gas. And there are more. If you go into electricity, we need to reform our power sector. Today we have an environment where the tariffs are not cost reflective, and so the system effectively has ground to a halt. The essential thing is the government feels we don't want to raise tariffs because poor people cannot afford it. But today, poor people either don't get electricity or they have a generator called, I better pass my neighbor, which they're paying, buying petrol for, and then the actual cost will come to probably a number that is more than the new tariff will be. So, and they could actually get more efficient electricity more often, and the peace of mind and the opportunity cost of time. People are not valuing all of that. Talk less of what is done across an entire industry chain. The distribution companies, the transmission company, the generating company, the gas supply company, all of these things are value chains of opportunity that have just been stuck, for the last 3.5 years, because we have not had that courage, I call it courage, to take the right decision for the economy.
Courage on whose path?
Courage on the government, on the presidency. They're the ones who are the executive. They have to design and come up with a plan that works in the interest of the country, and then go to the National Assembly and pass the necessary legislation. The fact that your child might like ice cream does not mean you're going to allow him to take 10 scoops of ice cream. For such a baby, you might allow him, occasionally a little scoop, so he enjoys it, but you can't just let him have everything he wants. And in the same way, even if the Nigerians are clamoring, I want cheap fuel, I want, cheap electricity, if you look and see that the long-term implications is not right for all of us, you have to, as a parent, as a leader, take a decision and fix it and tell us why, and come back and justify it. That's what I mean by courage.
What are other chief executives like you? What are they looking at right now, even as we approach the polls, February 16th? Because if you take a look at even the markets, for example, I know that in the last 9 months or so, the market has lost close to 3 trillion naira in terms of, returns. Year-to-date change is still in a very precarious, though not so precarious, but minus 2% loss. For the market. Oil price is also there, averaging 61, 62 US dollars, though we had the highest of $86, I think, in 2018. Yeah, 2018 or so. And it's also been said that oil price will be averaged at $60 throughout this year. Let's see, hoping that there will be no disruption one way or the other. So what are chief executives like you, what are they looking at? Are you looking through a crystal ball? If you are, what are you seeing?
Each time I look further ahead and I say, if we maintain the status quo, the way the economy is run, it doesn't augur well for Nigeria. Population is growing faster than the the GDP growth. And so we will then keep on producing more and more poor people, people who are below the poverty line. And one day they will overrun us. One day you will not be able to drive from Asokoro to across town to Wuse because there are just too many poor people around. So we need to find a way to employ them. And if that means, restructuring many sectors of the economy, so be it, because we can't have all these young men and women doing nothing. They go through school, spend a lot of time, come out. Many of them, what they've learned is not even useful in the world we live in today, because we're moving towards a knowledge economy. So we really need to retool the way the system works fundamentally. And that is on one hand. Now, if you then say, what happens if we have another global crisis? Look at the US economy, which has become very protectionist, America first. Yeah? Look at the US fighting off with China. So that trade war, the two biggest trading partners in the world are fighting each other.
Europe isn't also doing well either.
Yeah, Europe is not doing well. Britain is going to Brexit. And and if you then throw in another oil crisis, and it could happen, because when you ask me what are we concerned about, my concern is I'm trying to do the best I can, but I'm also mindful that my house, so a fire could come and burn my house, and that's where I live. Then what will I do? If another oil crisis comes across the economy today or within the next 3 to 5 years, what capacity do we have to withstand the shock? Can the central bank balance sheet take it on? These are questions we have to ask ourselves. Can the reserve survive at $43 billion?
Beyond a few months?
Yeah. And of course, the reserves has, some forwards and swaps in it. There's some Eurobond component in it. So the effective reserve is probably not up to $26 billion. Ask yourself those questions, and you begin to ponder that, indeed, we continue to push away the day of reckoning. We continue to avoid taking that critical decision we should take. And it's almost like a parent deciding that instead of paying for their children to go to school, they would rather spend the money with husband and wife going to parties and having a great time. And wearing the best clothes, and the kids are at home doing nothing.
Now, from your statement, what I could also infer is that perhaps the economic growth that we're seeing, because Nigeria's economy is still anemic, whether you look at whether in whatever way you look at it. For me, I feel it's still anemic, and it still needs a lot of blood tonic, like you know, a lot of blood tonic. But how will it now, or it may get worse actually. That anemic nature may get worse, just like you said, if oil prices or anything happens to the oil market. So does that mean that the plus 1% that we're seeing for economic growth is dependent on the stability that we've seen in the price of oil for the last 1.5 years?
Of course.
Since recession, since they said we've gone out of recession. So anything that happens to oil price now will go back.
Absolutely.
In fact, we'll go back to a recession, because we've seen that oil prices have been stable, and the Niger Delta region too has been stable.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So, and again, we've refused again to wean ourselves out of oil. We talk about diversifying the economy out of oil only when the oil prices go down. As soon as they come up to a reasonable level, everybody forgets it, and it's business as usual, enjoying that cocktail of oil and gas, you know. Whereas we should be thinking of how do we make this economy impact on Nigerians much more actively. And it's not just the oil sector. If you think about the amount of infrastructure deficit in this country, roads, transportation, what we need to do in terms of building adequate connectivity from one part of the country to another. It's running at an estimate of something like $60 billion. There's no way this government can afford it. If you look at their budget for 2019, for instance, at 8.8 trillion naira, the capital expenditure component is just about 1.4, 1.5 trillion naira. Our budget keeps getting higher, but it's actually lower this year compared to the year before. But then you tell yourself, you know for sure you need to invest $50 to $60 billion. And the only way to do that is for you to attract private sector investors. What are you doing to make that environment conducive? What are you doing to free up the framework for them to come in? And what are you doing to actually outline your approach to those projects? They will come because they recognize there's opportunity. If the economy has the fluidity to move similar to other emerging countries such as South Africa or Turkey or Brazil, of course, it will pick up. And those are the steps we're expecting to see from the center. We are yet to see them in a very articulate manner.
Okay, let's quickly take a break, and when we come back, Ike Chioke is still with me. We'll continue the discuss on the Nigerian economy. What's next? I think in the second half, we'll also be looking at what decisions the next Chief Executive Officer of Nigeria PLC will take, whether it will be this incumbent or another person at Aso Rock, or is it Aso Villa, or the Villa will be taking, whoever that will be there. What are the decisions, hot decisions, in fact, that the person will be taking? We'll be right back after this break. Join us again.
Are you an entrepreneur or small business owner looking for a fast and cost-effective way to grow your customer base? If yes, Moneyline with Nancy is offering you an opportunity to showcase your business on our Big Small Business segment to help you reach out to more customers. Take advantage of this platform. Reach us today on 0814-833-9088 or email us at moneylinewithnancy@gmail.com. Moneyline with Nancy, supporting small businesses to grow.
All right, welcome back. In case you're just joining us, you've missed, the first half of the interview, but you can still be with us right now. Ike Chioke is still my guest. He's the Group Managing Director at Afrinvest, and we've been looking at the economy even as the elections take center stage now. We've talked about, the anemic economy and some of the things that actually even led to why the country entered the recession, and some of the things that we need to begin to look at. But like I said before the break, whosoever that will come in February 16th or after February 16th, what should the person be doing? Whether it's this incumbent or a new person that will come in, what would the next Chief Executive of Nigeria PLC, like I said, will be doing? Like I said before the break, hot decisions. What do you think?
Well, I think that if they were to really want to take their executive position seriously, they may want to approach it from two dimensions. There's a soft dimension and there's a hard dimension. Let me try and explain what I mean. I think that today the country suffers from a huge integrity deficit on the part of the government. That if the government announces something on NTA, 99% of us look at them with skepticism, you know. So now what the government needs to then do something about how to make sure that what it says is actually what is done on ground. What I mean is that by the time government announces something and you come to the street and see how that thing is being implemented, it is very far and away from what they've actually announced. And often you see all kinds of characters who have been hired as one contractor or consultant in the middle trying to, you know, take advantage of it against the people. Now, I think that the government needs to take a more studied effort at how to execute any program so that what is on ground is essentially achieving the objective they set out to do, in a way. You understand? At the same time, I think that the population itself needs to be better sort of rallied together to work as a cohesive group of people, you know. And that means that we all have to be aligned. This idea of patriotism, you know, we are one Nigeria. The government needs to walk the talk, you know, not just talk it. Therefore, you can get people in neighborhoods learn that cleaning your street is your responsibility. You know, telling the security forces there are some strange people in this area is your responsibility. We all need to work together because it's not everything government can implement. That's how other civilized societies work together. Now, on the flip side, government has to then look at the hard issues that's facing them. We don't have enough money, but how do we use the little we have most effectively? You know, I've talked about the exchange rate differential. We can harmonize it to one exchange rate and free up more cash all the way across the system from federal to state to local government so that it gets into the economy and the government can do more things with it. And that's an easily 17% increment with the same level of income in dollars. Yeah? You can also take out the fuel subsidy issue. And I think it's way overdue. While we're still, you know, fighting about petrol, the rest of the world are moving to renewable energy. And in time, many European countries are phasing out electric, you know, cars that are using fuel. You see what I mean?
By 2025, Norway, even Britain and all
we
that.
need to wake up and recognize that we only have a few more years, maybe a decade or a decade and a half left, to use this oil money to transform the economy, because after a while it may become worthless to us. Of course, gas will remain very relevant, and that's another subject area. So if you then think about, you know, how to release income from your system, then the rest is how to attract investment into the economy and then deciding on which key areas are important. Power is critical, oil and gas are critical. If you can reform one of those two sectors efficiently, you'll probably have as much, again, the impact of what the telecommunications reform did in the economy. And then we can quickly get to that 67% GDP growth rate you talked about, and perhaps even begin to punch towards double-digit growth rates.
Which we need.
Which is what we need. Yeah. To, you know, once you get that, then I think that the main focus should be human capital development, health and education. There's no point growing illiterate, poor people. If you grow illiterate, unhealthy people, then you don't have human capital. You just have human beings. Today, you need people who are intelligent, who are in tune with the modern economy, who can get on a computer like yours and program or connect to anywhere in the world and get the information they need. Because today, living in an information age, it means that if you have access, you can get pretty much any information. Education can be cheaper if we use modern techniques to deliver it. Same thing with healthcare.
Okay. You know. Just as we end the program, because I'm looking at our time now, and it's very fast spent. I would like you to talk about, even as we move towards the elections, about a little bit about voter education, because just some days ago on the show, I talked about if our votes still count. And I know that even as business people, we look at the political environment. What businesses and investment don't like is uncertainty. And we've seen so much uncertainty in the system that has caused a lot of exodus out of the Nigerian market. So speak to me or speak to Nigerians in like 10, 15 seconds on what we should do even as we approach the 2019 elections.
I think that we should all believe and have faith that that PVC we have has power. You know, both political parties will try to make us think that, oh, these people are going to outrig us, and so it doesn't matter. It matters. Show up on that day, vote, and remain there and count your vote and be sure. So you can at least know that my polling station, this is the vote results. It's critical. You'll be surprised that if all of us did that, that the results will be quite different from what people are projecting, you know. And think about who it is that is representing you. I think I always look at politics from a very local point of view. I may forget all the presidential and gubernatorial stuff. Who is your legislature?
Very important.
That is the person that's actually controlling your issue, your problems in your area. So think about representing not so much as which platform everyone is, but who is the candidate. Because if someone is on the so-called popular party, but you know is an illiterate and has a shady background, perhaps, please don't go and vote such a person. Because no matter how nice the party is, he's really the wrong person for you. So choose your candidates carefully and learn to understand who's representing you.
Okay, in 30 seconds, the final one now, because I saw your report on the precipice, on the precipice, isn't it?
Precipice,
yes. And you analyzed 3 scenarios, the base case, the pessimistic case, and the optimistic case. Tell me what they are. I'll tell Nigerians because I have actually read it.
Our base case is saying that the elections are free and fair, and the incumbent returns, and it's business as usual, in which case we're projecting maybe 2.5%, 3% growth, GDP growth this year, trending towards 3%. There's not much would change, and hopefully would expect that the government would, have that courage to make some of the key reforms in the sector. The optimistic case is where the government comes with new energy, comes with new energy, or it could be, a new party that comes and says, we want to prove ourselves, and takes 2 or 3 sectors that we've talked about, either we talked about oil and gas or power of infrastructure reforms, and then coupled with some of the softer issues like security and ease of doing business or human capital development, and really focuses on changing and reforming these to have greater impact on Nigerians. And then you could see us really quickly get to the 6-7% growth we're used to and begin to trend towards the double-digit growth area. Well, our pessimistic case is the opposite of both, where there's no free and fair election, there's widespread insecurity as a consequence, and we are still talking about who won or who didn't win. Investors all run away, our economy slumps, and we go down to 1% GDP growth.
So in essence, let me summarize what you said. Our outlook for 2019 is largely dependent on these elections.
Absolutely.
I think we'll leave it at that. Many thanks for joining me.
It's a pleasure.
On the show.
Thank you, Nancy.
All right, that's the